All 3 days. And do I have both briefs? Thank you. I need to, can you put this in the blue folder? I will do it.
Professor, you know if the conference room is open after class?
It's going to be, yeah, I have it reserved for the rest of the quarter.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we are rolling on November 17th here at UCLA, where it's a beautiful day. Sunshine is shining. Pierre is even in class now. What America. And we're here to have a debate on guns. And specifically, the topic we're going to address is this house would keep the mentally ill from guns. On the affirmative is someone has great handwriting. Carrie. And on the negative, Young. And he will give you time signals. Bump, bump, bump. And whenever you're ready, sir, we are rolling.
Hi, my name is Corey. Today we're going to be debating if this house will keep the mentally ill from guns.
Hi,
This is
Corey.
a policy brief, and I'm arguing on the affirmative. I am going to skip the definition and go right into the problem.
Great.
And when arguing about whether the mentally ill should have guns, there's kind of two problems. And one of them I feel is kind of a red herring. And this is the one that gets kind of the most immediate attention, and this is when a mass shooting happens. Meaning, every time a mass shooting happens, there's all this attention on mentally ill trying to get them to be banned from guns. When the fact is, it's going to do very little to reduce this kind of violence. So if you look at the statistics, violence from the mentally ill accounts for maybe 4% of the national average with guns, and that's according to Margaret Sanger of the New York Times in 2015. And meaning that reactionary gun laws that focus exclusively on mental health will unlikely result in any significant change in gun violence. However, there is one issue that when mentally ill and guns go together, that is a very serious topic, and that is they're at a greater risk for suicide. And when guns are involved in suicide, it's the greatest chance of it happening, and the odds of them actually dying is greatly significant. And without having stricter gun control laws, we're letting thousands of people unduly die. So when you look at the data, it's almost irresponsible to allow them to have guns while they're going through a crisis situation. According to J.W. Swanson in his article, Mental Illness and Reduction in Gun Violence and Suicide,
Year?
in 2015, the national data shows that more than 60% of gun deaths are by suicide, and mental illness is a major underlying cause. And that's including all gun violence, including homicides. And in the same article, you say having a prolonged mental illness will make a person 47 to 74% more likely to commit suicide compared to a non-mentally ill person. And then when we look at how big of the problem is, it's reaching almost epidemic proportions. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and is very preventable, but yet each year it continues to grow. And the vast majority that do go through with the suicide have a mental illness. Looking at the statistics, it's clear that this is a massive problem trying to quell the situation. They directly correlate to the success of suicide. In this past year alone in the United States, over 42,000 suicides were recorded, and of those, 21,000 were by firearms, so roughly 50%. And those who attempted suicide with a firearm, between 80 and 90% of those wounds were fatal, according to Angelina Salviato from Harvard Journal in 2016.
Excellent.
And like I said, many of these are preventable, but possessing a firearm drastically increases the likelihood of making an attempt and making it successful. Again, according to the statistics, 90% of all attempts that involves means other than, or 90% of all suicide attempts do not involve a gun. So in that 10% window, 50% of the deaths occur. And this is from Miller and Hemingway from the 2014 New England Journal of Medicine.
Year?
Is it 2014? And what's more is more than 90% who do survive a suicide attempt will never go on to do it again. So this shows kind of the problem how the gun deaths are statistically more likely to cause the death, reduces the chance of them surviving, and will make sure that they won't have a chance to get better and seek help. And we have this problem mainly because our gun control is woefully inadequate. Most states don't have effective means of removing firearms, and even when they do, the ability to keep firearms away from a significant period of time is limited. Currently, the only way to prevent a mentally ill from having guns is if they're involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility, and that's extremely hard to do, and even some of the most severely mentally ill will never have that happen to them. That's according to Michael Lau in 2013 from the New York Times. So it brings me to the solution. And one of the more effective means of preventing mentally ill from having guns is allow them to do a voluntary registry. Meaning, if they're having a temporary illness or temporary time in their life where they're feeling suicidal or depressed, they could put themselves on a list. And so while they get through the crisis, when they get through the crisis, they'll be able to protect themselves and not take away their rights for a permanent ban. However, those who do show clear signs of recurrent suicidal behavior, major depression, prolonged indicators of violence, and suffer from severe mental illness that lasts a lifetime, they should be barred from owning guns. And this is because this is a more common sense approach where at some point reason and safety has to take precedence over civil liberty. And if a psychologist can sign off on that they should not have access to a gun, it should be taken away. Will the solution work? Right now there is actually current legislation that would do just that, with a voluntary put themselves on the National Incident Background Check list. Meaning if someone puts themselves on that list, they cannot access firearms or buy them until they put in the submittal, and then they need at least 30 days before they can retrieve a gun. And again, according to Angela in 2013, a person who does this would be significantly less likely to kill themselves because whatever the distressing situation there is, they'd be over within 30 days. And so I think the advantage of this proposal is that it's more of a common sense approach to mental health. It doesn't treat every single one, doesn't treat them all poorly. So for those that need the temporary help, they can get it. And then for those that need more help or show prolonged danger, they also be prevented from getting the guns. And overall, and what this would do is help reduce the stigma while drastically reducing suicide deaths by the mentally ill. And so on balance, while there is a significant stigma against the mentally ill, we need to do more for them and we need to do more to protect ourselves. I think with my solution, it'd be the best possible way to help them,
Okay,
Yeah.
we got the idea. Thank you so much. Yes. I now stand open for...
Now standing open for cross-examination and clarification.
Very nice. Thank you, sir. Move slightly to the left so she has room to be on the camera. Move to your right, to my left, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jan. A little bit more. He won't bite. Can you move a little more toward him? Yeah. And, okay. Thank
In
you.
your brief, you mentioned that limiting the mentally ill from getting access to guns won't have much effect on mass shootings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, I totally agree. Second, what do you think guns are for? Like, why do Americans want guns so much? Is guns for protection or is guns for killing? Which one do you think is true?
Well, I think that goes on to individual. People have it as a hobby. They do it for hunting. They do it for self-defense. And so I can't comment on why every single person has a gun, but most likely out of either self-defense or hobby or sport.
Okay, so do you think self-defense is very important for people?
For some people, yes.
Okay, do you think guns will help them achieve that protection, like more than if they don't have guns?
It depends. I think if they're of sound mind, then yes, it will. But if not, I believe a gun will put them more at risk themselves and others than it will to protect them.
Okay, so in your brief you said because of the high suicide rates for people with mental illness, you think it's better to keep them from guns. So now that they can, so it's better to keep them from guns for that they can commit suicide.
Correct.
So do you think keeping them from guns will also prevent them from being able to protect themselves with guns?
Well, obviously, yeah, if they don't have a gun, they can't use a gun to protect themselves. But realistically, they're a far greater chance to die by their own hands than by an intruder. And that's why we have a law enforcement system in place. So if there is a crisis, they can call the police.
Okay, so you think guns is the main victim for them to commit suicide and then really succeed in dying?
Correct.
So you think that, so basically in your brief, your solution for keeping people from guns mainly targets people who have like major depression disorders and people who have really severe mental illnesses. You think those people with severe mental illnesses, when they are really determined to die, they can achieve that through other purposes other than using guns?
Oh, they absolutely can. But if you look at the data, when people commit suicide, it's normally an impulsive act that happens almost immediately after the thought. So anything you can do to prolong how long it takes for them to kill themselves, the greater the chance that it is for them to seek help. And with a gun, it offers a quick solution and very impulsive one. So I think it reduces a significant amount of death.
Okay. Do I still have
Is that, you have 20 seconds.
time? Okay.
Yeah.
But you do agree that if people are really determined to die and they do find a way to die, they would die no matter whether they have guns or not?
Absolutely. If someone really wants to do it, they can. Reduce firearms is just save thousands of lives. It wouldn't prevent all suicide, obviously.
Okay. Thank you. Young and Corey. Okay, the chair will now recognize the leader of the Oh, and so now you need the final exam.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Look and read. And by the way, when it says use the gun debate, you can use this gun debate, but I prefer BDS.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, the chair will now recognize the leader of the opposition for her 7-minute constructive opposing the government case.
Okay, I'm Young, and
Hi, Young.
Hi. And the topic today is on this house would keep the mentally ill from guns, and I'm on the negative stance, and this is the policy debate. Jumping across the whole definitions, what is the problem? So I think there are 3 problems mainly. One is that mental illness exists. Second is that gun violence exists. And the third is that people just assume that mental illnesses are closely related or directly linked to gun violence, which is not the case. So how big is the problem? First of all, mental health and gun violence, they are separate big problems. For mental health, according to a 2014 national survey done by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, about roughly 20% of the total adult population in the U.S. Have some sort of mental illnesses. And about gun violence, a lot of people die due to gun violence each year. Either it's suicide or it's homicide. Although offenders with mental illnesses are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, psychiatric symptoms relate weakly to criminal behavior. For example, according to Applebaum in 2006, less than 3% to 5% of U.S. crimes involve people with mental illness, and the percentages of crimes that involve guns are lower than the national average for persons not diagnosed with mental illnesses. And it's published in American Journal of Psychiatry. Databases that track gun homicides, such as the National Center for Health Statistics, which is the online database, similarly show that fewer than 5% of the 120,000 gun-related killings in the United States between 2001 and 2010 were perpetrated by people diagnosed with mental illnesses. Also, crimes rarely were directly motivated by symptoms. Specifically, according to Peterson et al. In 2014, of the 429 crimes coded, only 4% were directly related to psychosis, 3% were directly related to depression, and 10% were directly related to bipolar disorder. So why do we have the problem? So basically, people have biases towards those with mental illnesses, and we usually think they're crazy, mad, or like insane. But actually, in fact, a lot of mental illnesses has nothing to do with being crazy or mad, such as depression or attention deficit disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as the OCD. And there are people who have phobias, and that has nothing to do with violence whatsoever. As for gun violence, many factors are involved. One is race and poverty. So much of America's day-to-day gun violence is concentrated in the poorest, most racially segregated neighborhoods, according to TheGuardian.com, published June 2016. And there are other risk factors like substance abuse and access to guns. Because mental illnesses and gun violence are both big issues, and they get reported together a lot in news and other media, people sometimes just assume that mental illness is closely related to gun violence without many real evidences. And people blame the mentally ill for violence, but when in fact the mentally ill are more likely to be victims, according to Masso and McLeish in 2015. Also, because the mentally ill are vulnerable to violence, and having guns is supposed to be a means of defense, especially in the United States, keeping the mentally ill away from guns is only going to make the already vulnerable population more vulnerable by making them having one less defensive method against crimes. So what is the solution? So about mental health, we should educate the public about what mental illnesses really mean, and to reduce some of the social stigma we have toward mental illnesses. And we should let the public know some easy ways to get help when suffering from potential mental problems, such as they could go to mental health crisis lines, and also provide help for the homeless mentally ill people by helping them find permanent housing and have social workers go out and help them. About gun violence,
2 left.
it is important to limit access to guns in general and not just targeting the mentally ill people. We should run background check for gun purchases, and maybe we should even have tests for people before they buy guns, and test how risky prone people are, just like we run a test for the whole driver's license, and it doesn't seem like people have an issue with that. We could also have safer storage requirements like child safety locks, loader indicators, and storing firearms unloaded. Will the solution work? About mental health, when the public knows what mental illness really means, and when they are less afraid of people with mental illness or getting mental illnesses themselves, people are more likely to get help and more likely to help those with mental illnesses. And okay, so about gun violence, according to Santella Tonorio et al., evidence from 130 studies in 10 countries from 1950 to 2014 suggests that in certain nations, the implementation of laws targeting multiple firearms restrictions is associated with reductions in firearm death. Laws restricting the purchase of and access to firearms are also associated with lower rates of intimate partner homicides and firearm and intentional death in children, respectively. It was published in 2016. So what are the advantages? There will be less social stigma about mental illness. The real issue, gun violence, will be targeted, and more safety and more protection for people with and without mental illnesses. So on balance, we should not keep them mentally ill from guns.
Thank you very much. You now say something, don't you, Young?
Oh, I now stand open to cross-examination
and points
of clarification.
Thank you, Young.
Hi, my name is Corey.
Hi, Corey.
So, you mentioned how the mentally ill could use guns in self-defense. How realistic do you think that is? How many people use guns in self-defense?
Oh, I think it's not like in practice really use guns to defend themselves, but it is the point that people might have guns in their homes that's really protecting them. So, for instance, like if like a robber wants to rob somebody and they know that a person might have guns, they might be less prone to rob that person. But unfortunately, for people with mental illnesses, and especially people diagnosed with mental illnesses, the mental illness actually goes on their record and for a lifetime. So like criminals can just check up for those records and they will know that those people won't have guns because they are restricted. And then they will be more likely to like do crime, like to harm those people who are mentally ill than who are not. Like because for people who aren't mentally ill, you don't know if they have a gun or not. Like they can pull out a gun from anywhere. So yeah.
Have you found any evidence that's ever happened? Have you found any evidence that someone has used a background check to rob someone?
I don't have evidence for using background checks to rob someone, but in my brief, there's evidence that background checks actually reduce gun death, and also, like I said, the record is public, when you are applying for school and when you are applying for jobs and when you go to the hospitals, like the records are just open to all those people, and so you are actually exposed to the risk. Then like it's just that the record is out there, so if anybody is going to take advantage of it, they can. And actually, since right now, people with serious illnesses aren't really limited to use guns, so I don't know why people would use that information right now to harm others. So there shouldn't be any evidence until the law is actually implemented.
Okay, and then you talked about with weapons kind of putting safety locks on them or kind of putting better storage. And how would that be effective use if someone, say a mentally ill person wanted to kill themselves?
Oh, that wasn't targeted for that. Basically, a lot of gun deaths happen by incidents, like a toddler would they would do it unintentionally. And what I'm saying is we shouldn't target the mental illness people as a whole. We should just target the general people who are exposed to gun violence.
Okay. Thank you. That's time, right? Mm-hmm. That's time. Thank you so much. Okay, it's now time for those infamous 4 steps of refutation. First from the government, where he will tell us that she said, I disagree because, therefore.
Okay, so she said that when discussing the mental illnesses, she mentioned stuff like ADHD, anxiety, phobias, and saying that's significant within the debate. And I disagree because I think any sane gun laws, especially dealing with the mentally ill, would look past those issues and kind of separate some of the more severe mental illnesses, such as bipolar, schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, ones that have links to depression, to violence, and those are the kind of mental illnesses that we need to focus on. And I agree that I'd agree that with ADHD and all that, those shouldn't be considered in banning mentally ill from the guns. Therefore, I think it'd still be a more effective policy to remove guns from the more severely mentally ill. And then she said that testing for weapons would help reduce gun violence. And I disagree that, because when you look at the mentally ill, when it's in the case of a mass shooting, they're looking to commit violence. They don't need training. That's not going to stop them. That's a deranged individual that sadly you cannot help. But in terms of mental health that are more suicidal, I think testing, any amount of safety or testing is not going to be an effective approach. Just having the weapon available, especially immediately, will just lead to trouble. And she said that the stigma needs to go down. And, well, I agree with that, but I disagree that it ignores the reality of the situation. Well, of course I'd like the stigma to go down. You have to look at the deaths. And when 21,000 people are dying each year with handguns, that's a significant risk and one that needs to be taken seriously. Therefore, when you weigh the pros and cons, even if there is a little bit of stigma and people might have misconceptions about them, getting rid of guns is still the best way to go about it, because it will save the greater amount of lives. And then I think she said that crimes aren't related to the symptoms, but I think it can be kind of disingenuous, because with mental illness, it's kind of a spectrum of problems, and so I may not be motivated by mental illness. People with severe mental illnesses are, on average, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more depressed, a little bit more angry. The mood swings are greater. And so, while the mental illness might not be the exact trigger for violence, it definitely is a cause. Therefore, when looking at mental illness and looking at the dangers it poses, you have to consider the whole kind of more holistic view and realize that, yes, these people have problems and they're very severe, and therefore you need to treat it as such, and it has a greater health risk for the rest of the country.
Okay, thank you. Chair will now hear from the leader of the opposition for her 4-step refutation. Take a step to your right, please. Thank you, ma'am.
He said that severe illnesses matter more than just mild mental illnesses. I actually agree with that. What I don't agree with is, for this whole gun issue, just targeting on people with mental illnesses only. For suicide, not just people who have severe illnesses commit suicide, and guns don't just make them more likely to commit suicide, but anyone who wants to commit suicide, having access to guns will increase their rate of actually die, because a lot of people do things to commit suicide that aren't very lethal, like taking sleeping pills and stuff. But once the whole law is implemented and the severe mental illnesses people cannot use guns to commit suicide, they will then know some other lethal ways to commit suicide, like jumping off buildings, hanging themselves. And actually hanging happens a lot in psychiatric hospitals where there is no guns and no other ways to commit suicide. He said that, he said that to say crimes are not related to symptoms isn't enough, and he said that, and he agreed himself that mental illnesses are not the exact trigger for what makes them do violent things, either to themselves or to other people. That I totally agree with. Since it's not the exact trigger for that, let's just target on whatever the trigger is. Like if people are more risky prone, or if like people have suicidal thoughts but they don't have mental illnesses, like let's just focus on people in general who are more likely to commit suicide or who are more likely to do violent stuff, instead of just targeting on mentally ill people who are already like a vulnerable group of people. And then by targeting them, it will only make the social stigma worse.
Yeah, you can end if you want to now, it's fine.
Okay.
Just sum up.
Okay, he also said that guns might not be like real protection for people who are mentally ill. I disagree. I think that mentally, like according to research, mentally ill people are really prone to more violence than others, and having a by making the criminals not knowing whether they have a gun for protection, it actually protects them from being assaulted. Okay. So, therefore, we should not keep the mentally ill from guns.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, take your vote, pass it over. We don't have time to hear from you individually. We'll just hear from the TAs, but I will announce the results of the balloting. Thank you very much, everyone. Just two?
Ham Joe, how's the ticket?
Tell me how he voted. Okay, let's close. Do I have all the ballots? The decision on a very close round was 11-7 for the government that we should keep mentally ill from guns. Jared, quickly, say how you voted and why.
I voted for the government side. I thought you all both used sources really well, and you had some good briefs. But at the end of the day, I think you dealt with the self-defense line of questioning really well. Also, props for that line because you kept hitting with that, so you did a nice job there. Also, you identified like the main issue is like at some point safety has to take precedence over civil rights, and that's really what this entire round was about. So good job on that. And I like your temperament in general. You just handled it very extemporaneously. For you, the margin of mental illness is a bright line. I really like that because I feel like one of the main points of your case was just like, look, how do you tell who gets to have weapons and who doesn't? Because not all mentally ill people are the same. There's different degrees. That's a great argument. You kind of lost me a little bit on the, and it seems to me like your personal view is probably that guns are a bad thing in general in the levels that we have them currently. And it seemed to me I was interfering. Yeah, it was interfering a little bit because you were saying things like, we should kind of like control them in these circumstances, but also this is kind of what the other side argues, and because of that, I think it made it a little bit less persuasive. But yeah, good debate overall.
Joe?
Yeah, so I thought this was a really good debate. Corey, I did end up voting for the affirmative on a small margin because I think you knew what the negative was going to be about mass shootings, and you talked about it, but you said this isn't the main issue. I'm here to stop suicides. And I think that you were able to do that. I think for Young, what I would have suggested is like maybe more statistics, like how many people actually commit suicide using other means. Talk about how like those numbers are just going to go up. You did say they would commit suicide using other means, but like I still wasn't sold on that analysis when Corey's telling us like, yeah, but it makes it harder, so that means like less people would end up doing it. But I did really like how you went with like, well, people might find the medical records and know that they're not armed and therefore more vulnerable. I think like ultimately it's hard to win this debate on the opposition side, and I do think that Corey's his proposal is going to end up saving some people from committing suicide.
Yeah. I want to say one thing. They skipped the definition, but in real life the devil is in the details. And this vague definition of mentally ill and how it's going to get defined and enforced is going to be the real sticky wicket in this whole proposal. I'll stand over here and hand out the final, and they'll hand out the midterm.
All right. When I call your name, please come up and grab your midterm. Moses.
Moses. Yeah.
You and I
Yeah.
I did.
Kelsey.
It's not necessarily straight from the book. Yeah.
Young.
Yeah, I think
Megan. Monique.
I work in
Laura. Anthony. Roshan. Rihanna.
Okay, so if I go to the charger, I can find out.
Nayeli. Thelma. Is Thelma here?
Thelma and Louise.
I don't think so. Thelma's not here. Song. Song left.
No, but I'll be in my
Okay.
I don't know. It's 13. What's the last
what is
door
this
on the right?
Alberta.
Last door on the right.
I'll just follow you there.
Over there.
I'll just
Clayton.
follow you there.
Sam is not here. Jared is not.
Why are you going?
Where I say
Why you
you
going Sunday,
done
bro?
say
Why are you going on Sunday?
yeah.
Busy?
I'm only gonna, I'm just doing one here. Yeah, so I'm just doing one on Saturday.
Yeah, that is it.
Final?
Wait, did we tell them we're in
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Joe and I will be doing office hours in the conference room. I imagine there's people who are not happy with their scores.
Everyone's good? Okay, great. Praise the
Did you
Lord.
guys grade together, or?
More or less, yeah. Yeah, we will be holding office hours right after class in the conference room, second floor of,
It's gotta go off.
what is it, Campbell? That building.
No. Rolf.
Roll. That's
Rolf, second floor, the first day on the left. First day on the first the door on the right.